international entrepreneur and philanthropist James Caan CBE, Ashraf Garda, our champion South Africa founder, viewers of ITV and Facebook Live, directors of the Minara Chamber and other organizations, business leadership, government leadership, those of you that have joined us on the webinar, good morning, San Bonani, Namaste, Vanakkam, Assalamu Alaikum. My name is Solly Suleiman, President of the Minara Chamber of Commerce. It is indeed a privilege and pleasure to welcome all of you to this morning's webinar. It is a unique moment for us to have such a distinguished international guest speak to us, and I'm sure we will take away valuable input from this interaction. South Africa has been in a recession pre-COVID, and our economy has been compromised even further during this pandemic. Our leadership in government reacted fairly quickly and efficiently from the outset, but the lockdown has taken its toll on the economy. Hundreds of thousands of jobs have been lost, tens of thousands of businesses have been closed, and poverty has escalated dramatically in this country of ours. Our unemployment rate, according to yesterday's figure, is over 32%. I must apologize to James. We have load shedding this morning right up till Friday evening. So there may be many that cannot join us this morning, and this is the unfortunate reality of our country at this point in time. Load shedding has aggravated the damage to our economy. Anyway, it is what it is, and a topic for another day. The topic for this morning's webinar is very apt: strategies for growth and building resilience in a post-COVID world. Without further ado, I will call upon renowned South African media personality, Ashraf Garda, our facilitator for this morning's webinar, to introduce our guest. Ashraf is a multiple award-winning broadcaster. His media show on SAFM was judged the best weekend show at the MTN Radio Awards, and he was judged best news and actuality presenter at the same awards. He was the host of the investigative television show Special Assignment, and he built up a reputation as an authoritative, inspiring host with a mission to do what's right for the people of this country. Garda is a public speaker with a particular expertise in current affairs, business, and champion thinking moderator. He is an accomplished, engaging program director and has hosted a number of high-profile events. In November 2020, Ashraf was appointed as a member of the Council of Champions of the Social Justice M Plan, the brainchild of Professor Thuli Madonsela. Ashraf is the chief driver of Champion South Africa, a nation-building movement with a singular, powerful vision to build South Africa into a champion nation. We thank him for that. That's a big job. He's also the winner of the Turquoise Institute Media Awards. He is used as an analyst on Al Jazeera, CBC TV Canada, and RT. He's also a founder, again, as I mentioned, Champion South Africa, and he's a presenter on Salam Media and as well as a moderator. I extend grateful thanks on behalf of the Minara Chamber and the participants that both James and Ashraf could join us this morning. And of course, it's no cost to anyone. I wish to also thank all of you participants and viewers of ITV, viewers on Facebook Live, and all of you that have joined us on this webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Ashraf in conversation with James Caan.
Okay, that's time for me then to take over. Solly, I appreciate your kind words and a warm welcome on a very chilly South African day in most parts of the country. Maybe Durban historically slightly warmer, but everywhere else it's a rather chilly day in the middle of winter for us. But it doesn't mean we can't be warmed with the sense of enthusiasm that we are here for. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to move on very, very quickly and say this much, right? If nothing else you're going to remember today, the key thing to remember right now is this hashtag, Minara with James Caan. You got that? Minara with James Caan. And I'm going to ask you, even as this day or this hour actually unfolds, right, to take some pictures, screen grab the pictures that you see right now on the Zoom session itself, especially with everybody in the gallery. Share that on your various social media platforms, from LinkedIn to Instagram to Twitter to Facebook. Perhaps TikTok may not work. I don't know. Whichever one it is, it's really your choice. But do that and say something like, hashtag Minara with James Caan, and say something like, I am here. Can you do that? I am here. Minara with James Caan is the hashtag, okay? So let me tell you why I am here. So I'm here because I was asked by the Minara Chamber first up to be a part of this. And I've certainly known people like Saleh Suleiman and Ibrahim Patel and Asghar Mohammed and Shiraz Ghani as well, all people linked, I think, in many ways to the Minara Chamber and been very aware of the type of impactful work that the Minara Chamber does and continues to do in terms of the activations and the move to try and instigate thoughts and active nation building in their very own spaces. So why would I then, as part of Champion South Africa, with our stated goal to build South Africa into a champion nation, why would I take a step back from an event bearing the name of Minara and James Caan that promises so much? And that's really why I am here. The question to you is like, why are you here? And it's something for you to think about. Why are you here? What is it? So what that it's for free? It's never for free. You are giving off your invaluable time and you've made a decision to be a part of this event. So I don't need to know the answers now, but perhaps you could. In fact, on the chat line, you could drop us a chat line, comment right away and say, that's why you are here. Give me your name, your email address, even your social media handles, and very importantly, tell us why you are here. I certainly would want to know. As far as any doubts you may have about why ever you may be here, I think the name James Caan should eliminate all those doubts. So a warm welcome. And this is strange because, often we do this in a big auditorium and we'll try it differently. But certainly, James, to you, understand in the UK, a warm welcome to you. And I'll give you the applause. And I'd hope that everybody else in their own way would do that as well. So a warm welcome to you for giving off your time with us today. And the plan really, as we talk about who James Caan is, and I'll mention this, so, you can't ignore your reality, James, in terms of your role at the BBC's UK Dragons Den. We in South Africa are very familiar with Dragons Den as well, and this in terms of the important role where investors make a call live on national television. So that happened, I think 2007 for you. But currently I understand you work with HB or Hamilton Bradshaw, doing some important work and using that role from investment and equity building, but also to try and encourage the growth of entrepreneurs. And goodness, do we know that we need entrepreneurs? If you follow the stats in South Africa yesterday, the unemployment rate is frightening, absolutely frightening. So all the more, we can't use government and we can't use big business to enable us to try and find jobs. All the more, the need to be entrepreneurs, but not just to survive, but to thrive and to endure and to grow big time. And therefore, I think people like James Caan and your role, James, is critically important. So Dragons Den, I made the point. Also recently was involved in a show called The Business Class on CNBC, right? But besides that, he's been involved at different times with the startup loan scheme in the UK. And I mean, he's got that name, James Caan CBE, and you can probably work out what that means. But it does mean that it's something significant in terms of his role in Britain and that order of the British Empire or the CBE, right? But his passion is about building businesses and backing talented people. Goodness, I so resonate with that, James. And he's been doing that since 1985, which in the South African context would be 5 years before we started even having talks about our country. And we still want to build a champion nation. But he believes in people, thank goodness for that, and he believes in people who create successful businesses. I like your mantra with this firm belief, James, it's your attitude, not your aptitude, that determines your altitude. Goodness, we all want to fly to the sky, but it does start with attitude linked to aptitude that will deliver us to the heights that we want to go to. So I'm going to leave it at that and say once again, James, a warm welcome to you from an audience point of view, you know the story, right? Load shedding, no load shedding, you can make a plan. Comments on the chat line are most welcome. I see people like Charlie has done that. Says, great fans of the Dragon's Den, and James is one of my favorite dragons. Well, that's great. And there's a couple of more that I'll read out some of the comments just now, okay? But the plan is to chat for about 20 odd minutes or so. From an admin side, if we're overrunning time, please let me know. And then we want to pick out some of the questions from you, the audience, right? Because I don't want to just have it as a one-on-one. It's a one-on-one for you, but it's you, the audience. And if we can pick out some comments, and the plan is to stop around 10:30, and that's really it. So James, appreciate your time. Welcome, I should say, welcome to South Africa.
Good morning, Oscar. Firstly, it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you this morning. I've been to South Africa many times, and I've met a lot of young entrepreneurs there. And South Africa has a very, important space in my heart, because I recognize and empathize with some of the challenges that the country faces, and also the challenges that individuals face. And I do feel for the country in some of the dramas and challenges that have been faced today. So when I was approached, I was only too glad to extend my time to see if I could share any words of wisdom that could inspire, motivate, the entrepreneurs in South Africa, because nothing would please me more than to see, people in South Africa rise and achieve the success that they ultimately dream for. And I'm a good example. Although I've spent my life in Britain, but I originally come from Pakistan. I was born in Pakistan. And, therefore I understand as an immigrant, it is challenging, when you're in different countries, to try and make a name. Today, I'm speaking to you live from south of France in Monaco, which is where I live today. And the weather here is beautiful. The sun is shining, and I feel ready to rock and roll.
The weather is beautiful, the sun is shining. Goodness, you make us so jealous. This is not the plan. But anyway, what we talking about today...
That's what the rewards of success are.
Well, maybe, right? But of course, in many parts of South Africa, generally, we have the sunshine that you would get in the south of France every single day anyway, right? But now, specifically, we're going to talk about strategies for growth and building resilience in a post-COVID world. And that's such a broad topic, right? And I'll get to that in just a moment. But I think it's just fair that I pick your brain. We're talking to you quite bluntly because we think you're pretty successful. We think you're pretty cool. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking to you, okay? The world discriminates against people who are cool and successful versus those who are not. So we think you're okay. Why do you think you've achieved? Why do you think you've succeeded? Can you put that down in like a three-liner and say, I've succeeded because of this?
I wish life was as simple as a three-liner, Ashraf, but it's not. So one of the key things that I feel that I'm constantly thinking about as an entrepreneur is, how do I adapt when markets change? And one of the things that I've experienced most of my life is, whatever business I'm in, the one thing that is guaranteed is life never remains the same. Whether it's a pandemic, whether it's a financial crisis, whether it's my markets have changed, or whether it's the impact of e-commerce, the one thing that I think separates successful entrepreneurs is the ability to change and adapt when markets change. I think what I found with the pandemic last year is, as soon as it happened in March, I recognized very quickly that the circumstances and the landscape would change. And if I don't change, I could literally go out of business. So the first thing I did immediately was change my cost base, because the one thing I knew was I had no visibility of revenue or earnings or any customers. And therefore, if my cost base was not changed immediately, I would run out of cash. So I immediately take instant steps to reduce my cost base, to give myself that breathing space of survival. One example I can give you is, if you look at the brand Kodak, there was nowhere in the planet you could go where the brand Kodak did not exist. It was one of the most successful businesses in the world. Unfortunately, when technology moved in and cameras became available on the phone, they didn't react quick enough. They didn't change, and they missed that change in the market. And a company with a 100-year history collapsed overnight. And those things constantly remain in my mind. So the best piece of advice I can give any entrepreneur is, look at your market, look at the changes that are happening, and change with them. Do not let those changes leave you behind, because you could go out of business.
And maybe to rephrase, do not experience your Kodak moment, isn't it? Because Kodak experienced their Kodak moment.
Yeah.
How how difficult, and I'll just touch on that for a moment, so we know why Kodak, and we're not going to talk about Kodak specifically, but we know they didn't change. They felt they were ahead of the pack. They felt they had market dominance, not just market share, and there was no need to sort of digitize, right? And I understand that there was a sense of not complacency, but complacency built on incredible power at that time, right? Now, we speak to people as in our audience today at different levels, some of them super successful, some of them startups, some of them, trying to pivot, right? How difficult is it to want to change when you are pretty successful? I'm just thinking, so I'm a big football fan, and you come from the UK, and you'd understand that Manchester City now are the preeminent force, although Chelsea won the European Champions League. And one of the things that came through, right, is how Manchester City, having knocked all the others off, and I'm using a business example here because that's what it is, decided that that's a model they will stick with. But in a cup final last week, they tweaked, by the way, and they lost for that, those that follow football, right? The point I want to make, without talking football here, is like, when you know you've got a winning formula, how difficult is it to resist the change?
I mean, I think evidence shows it's incredibly difficult because people become, the more successful we become, the more complacent we become. And that is a general trend around the world. So I think, of course, it's difficult because you start believing in your own hype. But I'm a realist. I've been doing this a long time, and I recognize what are the consequences as not changing with the market. So I remember when I was in recruitment, I'd been very successful. The company was thriving. It was a world-class business, but all of a sudden, out of the blue, LinkedIn came onto the market, and they transformed the way recruitment worked. The biggest asset that I had in my recruitment business was I had one of the largest database of any recruitment company in the world. But literally, a guy could set up the next morning from his bedroom and have a bigger database than mine free from LinkedIn. So I lost my competitive edge overnight, and I thought my business would disappear. But I had to change and change very quickly. So I think every business, doesn't matter how big or small you are, there will be changes that will come about in your market. Sometimes it's pricing, competition, e-commerce, something happens, and your prices are out of date. You cannot perform. It could be the way that you market your service. So look at what's happening globally around the world today. The high street is dying of death because people literally can shop, from their sofa using their smartphone. If you are not embracing that, you will go out of business. In Monaco, I've got a friend of mine who's a retailer. He has 2,000 stores in the UK, and he is literally on the verge of collapse, because nobody is walking into his stores any day. So he's one of the biggest businesses in the country, but because of the impact of e-commerce, and he rightly says to me, James, I just missed it. I didn't think people would adapt so quickly. And he's been in business for 50 years. So I think it doesn't matter whether you're running, a car dealership, or a hairdressing salon, whatever you're doing as an entrepreneur, as a business person, you have to understand and watch what is happening with the market. What are your customers doing? And if you don't listen to your customers, if you don't follow that trend, you will find business will become very challenging. So one of the reasons people say to me, James, what on earth are you doing at the age of 60? You're still working 7 days a week. You're still pounding the phones. I'm doing it because every day is a different day. All of the experience that I've gained over the last 40 years is different today because the situations are different. So I think the key message for entrepreneurs is look at your market, look at your customers, look at your pricing, look at your competition, and understand what trends exist and how they're going to affect you and what are those consequences. So whatever it may be, the market is not the same today as it was a year ago, and what you were doing a year ago probably won't work today. And therefore that principle of mentally adjusting yourself, I think, is the key thing that keeps me going day by day.
But here's the question. In doing just that, right, I would think it would require somebody from within the business. So let me just title the person Chief Innovation Officer, but maybe there's a better title for that. Somebody in the business who, in fact, is second guessing the CEO every single day, because the CEO or the coach is in charge when things are going right. And when things are going right, you, in fact, require someone to say, but. And that needs to be happening all the time. Do you concur?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that I do is I manage 27 businesses, which is the size of the portfolio I have today. And every month I have management meetings with the senior management team. But one of the things that I developed last year is every management meeting I had, as well as having the SMT, I invited somebody from the ground floor into those senior management meetings because sometimes I think we get stuck in our ivory towers and we start listening to our own hype. And the guy who's on the ground, who's actually pounding the phone or walking the streets or talking to customers, we miss that edge. So one of the things that I do is always keep my ear close to the ground and not just rely on sophisticated board packs or board meetings with people in ivory towers. You've got to listen to what's happening on the ground, and regularly on a monthly basis, I'd set aside half a day every month. I actually call my customers. I want to hear directly from the customers. So I think the secret of that recipe is don't lose sight of what's happening on the ground. So when you are in that kind of senior leadership team, it's not just about the SMT, because sometimes I think they miss what's happening on the ground. So that I found last year was incredibly useful, because sometimes the messages that I got from some of my junior people conflicted what I was hearing from the SMT. So I think that my key message there is keep your feet firmly on the ground and don't necessarily rely on the media or what people are telling you. Find out for yourself. Talk to your people on the ground, and most importantly, talk to your customers, because ultimately they're the ones who pay you.
Absolutely. And talking about customers, in this case, my customer are the audience, right? And I'm very aware that we've had a string of people who've been putting comments. Ashraf, I can pick up Faisal Ayub as well, Bode, Ujuk as well, and Shamila. So that's the people that we're speaking to right now. And great that you're a part of it, right? But here's the thing, the general theme today is about growth and resilience in this COVID world. So, I mean, for me, this is the image. South Africa is entering the third wave. The UK, for example, today, I think yesterday, was day one of not a single death, I understand, since COVID arrived on the shores of the UK, right? But in this entire period of a year and a bit, I think of the whole world as being, well, in a boat, and we're rowing in treacherous waters, and we need to get to the seashore. And for that to happen, we need to row in sync. We need to find a harmony so that we can all get to the shore safely. If we don't do that, we will not get to the shore. So within that statement, there are lots of nuances. Now, the reality is, in terms of the brief to you, growth and resilience in the COVID world, or in fact, the post-COVID world, right? So perhaps I'll ask you this, 3 headline points that you'd like to bring up in terms of what we should take note of, that we absolutely must be fully aware of to be able to survive and endure in this post-COVID world. When do we get there?
So I think one of the things that I did last year that did absolutely work very well is I had a number of very small businesses that really, in the current environment, were never going to survive because they were too small and they didn't have enough customer penetration. And I got 4 of my kind of entrepreneurs together who all effectively ran their own businesses and, did a Zoom call. And I was quite blunt and very open with them and said, guys, let's put, cards on the table. We're facing some very difficult challenges right now. One of the suggestions that I'd like to, share with all of you today is sometimes we have strength in the collective and weakness as individuals. And what I try to do is encourage those businesses to come together and actually become collectively a larger business. And effectively, what I did was merge businesses together. So a lot of entrepreneurs are listening today. One of the things that you can do is think outside the box and think about the situation where on your own things may be very difficult, but you may have competitors around you, smaller businesses who do the same thing, but actually coming together. The thing that I've always found that stops us doing that is ego, because we want to own 100%. But one of the things that I never forget is my father, when I was very young in business, reminded me that 100% of nothing is still only nothing, but it might be 100%. And therefore, I'd much rather own a smaller percentage of a valuable pie than 100% of nothing. So if you are in a situation where you can come together with collective strength, you may fight to live another day and become way stronger. So, and I think what happens is people are frightened to speak to a competitor. But right now, in the current environment we are in, we don't have the luxury of pride or ego. We need to set that to one side and do what's right for our future and our business. I think the other thing that I found last year is when there is adversity, real opportunities exist. And last year, one of the things that I came across, what I hadn't done for a long, long time, I found exceptionally talented people all of a sudden becoming available who'd never been available before. And the opportunity of attracting talent was second to none. The problem was all of my businesses were saying, but James, I can't afford it. And I said, but remember one thing, I know you can't afford it, but he's out of work. This is a very different situation. But I think we had these preconceived ideas of talented people that may have been expensive. Of course, they were expensive in a strong market economy, but they're not very expensive when there's no work or business out there. So we were thinking outside the box. We were attracting people we'd never attracted before. And in some cases, we were sharing equity with them. In some cases, we were deferring income, but we were being more creative in how we came together. And today, now that the market is starting to show signs of recovery, our business is in a such stronger position because, as you know, my biggest passion and belief is it is people who transform businesses, not products and services. So what we found was some of those initiatives of last year have put us in such an incredible position because we gave those people an opportunity when opportunities were not available. So their loyalty and support to us is excellent. Our business is today stronger than it was before because we've got a team that we probably wouldn't have imagined we've got together. So I think the concept of looking at merging smaller businesses together and collective strength, looking at attracting talent when everybody else was looking the other way, but also embracing technology, recognizing that the new norm. So the biggest lesson that I learned from last year is historically and mentally, when we think of businesses, we can't help but think geographically because that's how we grew up in business. We service our local market. What the pandemic has taught us is barriers have come down. Access to customers is no longer geographically restricted because through e-commerce or Zoom or video conferencing, the entire market is available to us today. And therefore we can have an employee who doesn't have to live within commuting distance. He can literally live on the other side of the country. So your barriers have collapsed, your access to the market is much greater, and your access to talent. So all of a sudden today, I'm absolutely shocked that our businesses trade globally and internationally simply because the barriers have come down. Today, we're employing people sitting in London. We have somebody in Moldova, somebody in Hungary, somebody in Poland, somebody in the Philippines, somebody in India. Access to labor today is no longer a barrier. Access to talent has changed. So I think by thinking outside the box, by being creative and recognizing every time there is adversity, there is opportunity, but it only becomes available where people are open-minded and are prepared to explore and be creative. And they are some of the things that I did that actually did make a difference.
Okay, and talking about opportunity and creativity, I don't want the audience in this case to lose the opportunity to collaborate and co-create with other people. So I'm going to encourage you even now via the chat line, drop your name, drop the company, and drop your pitch. What is it that you do and the type of people you want to collaborate? Because as you can see what we're doing, it's not linear any longer. James and I are talking, you're listening, but at the same time as you're listening, you're part of a bigger ecosystem and you can make your own connection. So as a case in point, I'm looking at Nazreen Ibrahim, who's done just that from her own company, Nez on Consulting. I think that is his. So there you are. I mean, make the pitch and do just part of that. James, let me pick up on this then. So your point about, 100% of nothing is very little and rather, collaborate with others. So, I mean, that sounds wonderful, but in practice, is it fair to say that it may be necessary, but it's more difficult to collaborate with people who were one-time adversaries than actually forming into a relationship, a marital or a romantic relationship that sticks? that's possibly easier than getting together with people that you don't know, you don't trust, you possibly don't like, and up till the day before, they were actually your adversaries.
I think, and I've spent a lot of time on this, people we don't trust, we don't like. The one lesson that I've learned is more often than not, we don't actually even know them. You know, we prejudge or we pre-assume because of what we think. But so many people that I've met who says, "Well, I don't know James because I don't trust them," and I say to them, "Tell me something. Have you ever met him?" And you know, the often answer is, "Actually, I've never met him." And so, well, you can't judge people without ever meeting them. And I think the situation today, the biggest lesson that I learned on this strategy was what stops people collaborating is simply ego and pride. If you can set ego and pride to one side and keep an open mind, you could transform your business. Because remember, the other person is experiencing exactly the same as you. So collectively, you bring together resources, markets, opportunities, and you know, there is a phrase, two heads are better than one. But what stops us doing that, I honestly believe, is not the market, it's not trust, it's not competitor, it's pride and ego. And if you can learn to set that aside, you know, take the initiative, pick up the phone, make the call, make the connection, and give people a chance. And be creative because you may find it could transform what you're doing today.
And how do you learn to do that? Because, you know, ego, I understand, I think confidence, which is very linked to that, is inevitably that driver that gets you to leading from the front in the first place. How do you put a lid on all of that?
I think what I keep reminding myself is pride does not pay the bills and ego doesn't build the business. So, you know, if I'm happy to be a boutique, if I'm happy to be a small business, then that's okay. But I'm not. You know, I want to break barriers. I want to break ground. I want to create something that's a legacy. You know, I want to be proud of what I've got. And therefore, if I don't, the key thing is, what are the consequences of not doing it? That's how I managed to change my mindset.
How do you explain the difference then between, you know, equity shares? So, you know, people have shares in bigger companies on the one hand, and on the other, we talk about collaboration or co-creation, but it's not necessarily equates to equity. Your thoughts
So,
on that?
yeah, so one of the things that we did that I think was absolutely incredibly creative last year, when we were attracting talent that we hadn't considered would ever be available, everybody said to me, you know, oh my God, we're going to have to dilute, we're going to have to give away equity, etc. So one of the things that I came up with was we met somebody who was from a competitor who was absolutely exceptional as an individual. And I met him because he was recommended to me by one of my entrepreneurs and really liked the guy and wanted to give him some equity. So what we said to him was, look, obviously, whatever we've created before you arrive, we will draw a line in the sand. And we will give you shares, equity shares, but a different class of share. So we'll create a B share, and that B share creates a value from today. So whatever we achieve together moving forward, you will have a 10% share of. And he was excited because he was today an owner, he had real equity, real shares. But in reality, what did we actually dilute on his arrival? Nothing. Because we didn't give away any of the equity of the value that existed before he arrived, the value. So the truth of the matter is, on day one, I gave him 10% of nothing because nothing had been created. So he was going to share in the upside of what he contributed. But that mechanism enabled us to secure somebody that we otherwise would not have been able to attract. So I think when you look at, you know, equity dilution, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that, because you can be more creative. Because I listened to my team who were very anxious not to dilute what we had, because that is something that we'd spent years creating. But by simply being a bit creative, thinking outside the box and drawing that line in the sand and said, okay, let's ring fence that and create the equity in the future rather than the past, which meant there was no dilution, but we still provided equity to the individual coming in.
I'm going to encourage once again, people are putting down their comments, which is great. They're also promoting their own companies, which is just fantastic. In a few minutes' time, we're going to ask some questions. I mean, I have my own questions, but I'm going to give you a chance to ask specific questions. So you as the audience, outside of plugging your own company, and that's fine. When it comes to questions, probably we're going to have time for about 4 or 5 maximum. And I will look at the ones that I think possibly will have the greatest impact to deliver to the broader audience. So very broad questions, but very specific at the same time. That will take us a step further in terms of really getting James, in this case here, to think, well, in this case, very much outside the box. The chances are up to you here. You made the point from the outset, even in my intro, James, about people being critical to your growth. Now, I resonate with that, and I'll use my own experience with Champion South Africa as an example, because I use the mantra. I say, champion people build champion people, and champion people build champion organizations, and champion people build champion nations. So in that case, we're very much on the same side. But what I'd like to know from you is how does a person in leadership identify those champion people and then grow, or identify the people and then grow them into the type of champions that the organization absolutely needs?
Great question. And I think it's the one question that I probably get asked the most, which is everywhere in the world I've ever been, and my business, Humana International, I created that organization with 147 offices in 30 countries around the world. And when I reflect back, what was the most common question that was asked of me? Everybody said to me, one of the hardest things, James, is attracting good people. And I said, absolutely agree with you. But let me ask you a question. How much time do you actually spend looking for talented people? And the average response was between 5 and 10% of my time. I said, just to give you an example, I spend 35% of my time looking for talented people. So it's not that I'm actually better than you. I just spend 7 times more effort than you do, because something that is so challenging and difficult is never going to be achieved with a minimal effort. And therefore, so literally to this day, 35 years ago, when I started my business, I realized this was really difficult to do. And I would set aside 2 mornings a week, where I'd start at 8, finish at 11, a session of 3 hours, where that 3 hours, all I did was network and identify people in my market. And I've been doing that for 35 years religiously, week in, week out, day in, day out, because it is the one thing that I think can transform my business by attracting the right talent. The only way you can achieve that is if you put the effort in to do that. And remember, when you're identifying talent, it isn't an activity that can exclusively be done Monday to Friday, because half the time is actually researching who those people are and identifying, and the other part is actually making that connection. And a lot of that can be done evenings, weekends, etc. And therefore, there really isn't any excuse of putting in more time and more effort to do that. But if you are doing that consistently, regularly, and you are looking for people, what I've learned in my career is you don't end up hiring the best of a bad bunch. You hire the champion you're looking for because you put that concerted effort in finding him.
Interesting that you do that. And you use the word networking. And we think we know what the word networking means. And I'm not going to assume that I know everything. I'm going to put my ego down, as you've suggested early on. What is effective networking for you, besides the obvious swapping of cards and we never talk again?
So I remember about 5, 6 years ago, I recognized that networking had now changed from us going to an event, and shaking people's hands or attending events or conferences, etc. Social media became the new norm. And my children said to me, but James, you're too old, to embrace social media because it's a very young person's game. And, I ignored it for ages because, Facebook and LinkedIn, etc. were not really my thing. But then I realized that the world was evolving and that the social media was literally transforming lives. And I picked one platform because you can't be an expert on all of them. And I chose LinkedIn because I thought LinkedIn is the one that really is a membership or an ecosystem of professional people. And these are the kind of people that I will engage with in my career. And I started understanding LinkedIn. I studied what it does, how it works, what its functionality, and how do you drive traffic. And really, you have to think outside the box in terms of content. Initially, I struggled to attract any followers because it's such a crowded market. There are millions of people generating content. But through trial and error, by bringing in different people, by identifying different people with different skills, who had creative, who were writing, thinking outside the box, I found the formula of the content that started to work. And the content that was important is what I represented. So you can't you can't create or generate content across the board. It has to be specific. It has to be something that people identify with you. And by the end of the first 6 months, I managed to get 10,000 followers. Then I started to really refine and fine tune that content and got to 50,000. 50,000 became 100,000. And then I started to become a bit competitive because I saw how many followers other people had. And my kind of aspiration was to have more followers than the Prime Minister of England. And at the time, he had 900,000. And very quickly, I exceeded him and got to 1,000,001. Then I reached out to Barack Obama, so what does he have? And Barack Obama has an entire social media team and had 1.7 million followers. I then exceeded him to 2.2 million. And today I'm the 7th most followed person in the world on LinkedIn with 3.5 million active followers. But that didn't happen overnight. Was it a walk in the park? Did I make mistakes? Absolutely. But I was relentless in my focus and determination in converting what I do into a brand. And it can be done. It's not just because I was on Dragon's Den, because it doesn't matter who you are. Even I can create a post tomorrow. If the post is flat, I'll still only get 800 followers or 800 views. Your personality does not guarantee you that success. It is the quality of the content you produce that actually transforms what you do. And literally, week in, week out, every Sunday, I spend an hour in the morning thinking of creative content. I now work with somebody in India, I work with somebody in the UK, I work with somebody in France. So I'm constantly meeting people, who are creatives in the way they think, the way they write, and drawing those people in to generate content that I think can drive that activity. And of course, once you've got a strong brand in the market, it naturally converts to revenue, to business, and increased customer base.
Well, I certainly need to be following you on LinkedIn, and I'll stay with that part. And I think your story is fascinating, but you used the word, I discovered the formula. So to put you under pressure in a minute max, what is the formula?
I think the formula is being true to what you do and who you are. So, if you're running a small business and you happen to be in retailing, you can't be generating content on the economy. If you happen to be somebody, in financial services, there's no point in generating content that's talking about shed loading. So the thing that I learned is every time I drifted outside of what I stood for, the audience dried up. Because people don't want to listen to James Caan about shed loading, and they don't really want to listen to me about retailing. So the one key question that I saw is once you have established who you are and what is your voice, you need to stick to that. Because remember, it is a very crowded market. People will go to a specialist if they want to hear about shed loading. They will go to somebody specific about the economy. People follow me on jobs and entrepreneurship. So when I talk about the skills of interviewing or, how to become an entrepreneur or how to build a business, I get a mass following. If I start talking about the global economy, it dries. So my formula was stick to what you're known for and stick to what you're good at. Do not try and be, the master of everything, because you will not, it doesn't work. Then your topics have to be creative. And the thing that I've learned, it's not what I think is important, it's what people want to hear. And then you need to study what are the topics right now that people really care about. And every time I write a blog, I stop, I read it again, and I ask myself, what is the takeaway message? And so many times I write a blog, it's very interesting, but there's no takeaway message. And therefore I know it's going to bomb. So the takeaway message is important. Being true to yourself is important. Stick to content that is relevant and specific, in what you are and who you are, and write about something that people care about.
Okay, and in a one-liner again, your voice is what? I mean, I mean, you're alluding to it, but I
My
just want to
voice,
get
I
it on
think,
the
is,
record. Your voice is what?
yeah, I think my voice is entrepreneurship. That
Okay,
is what
got
I'm
that.
recognized for, and that is what I write about.
Okay. I've asked people to put some questions. Many people are more complimentary than questions, and that's fine because it just gives me a few more minutes because we probably will end around 25 past. Shamila Ramjawan saying great advice. Faisal Ayub commenting as well. Bokanga Molefi saying, James, you're such a good speaker and inspiring leader. Zahida Danka also commenting. There's a whole lot of different people. Angela Broom saying, I loved watching you on Dragon's Den. So great that you've done that, Angela. Let's talk about the realities that people are facing. So in South Africa, as in many other parts of the world, there's been a massive downturn in the economy propelled by what has happened around COVID-19. What we have is less of a social safety net than other countries of the world. We are struggling, absolutely struggling. Now, many of the people I think watching us now represent small business or business startups, and they're not big business, but they're certainly part of their very own C-suite. What they are doing, however, is we're all battling with revenues, leaving aside profits, we're just battling to stay afloat, okay? How do we compare, our model to stay afloat and thrive versus a high street model that many others may allude to or aspire to, but they're nowhere near that?
I mean, all I can say is when I started my business, it wasn't an empire. There was me, the telephone, the yellow pages, and a desk, and I was an immigrant in a different country, and it wasn't very easy. So I think adversity we all experience from time to time, but I fundamentally believe that it is your drive, your determination, and your commitment. The pandemic, is an obstacle. The financial crisis was an obstacle. Shed loading is an obstacle. If we are looking for problems, there are thousands of them. The question is, do we want to consume our mind with what we can't do, or do we want to focus our mind on what we can do? And, when we started this seminar, you translated the fundamental principles of what I believe in, which is it is your attitude, not your aptitude, that determines your altitude. It's the way you think and it's the way you behave that drives success. Do I spend a huge amount of time worrying about, all the reasons why I'm going to fail? No, because those are endless. I can think of thousands of them. What I try to do is focus my time on what I can do and where I can be successful. So right now, I honestly think the answer to your question is about mindset. It's making sure that you have the right mindset that enables you to succeed. Because sometimes we do become our own worst enemies.
Well, we can say so much. We've got 5 more minutes to talk. But I want to pick up, therefore, on the attitude that you speak about, okay? So I call it champion thinking or a champion mindset. But there are people, even though they've already done what many other people have not done, which means that they switched on to this session. There are many others who are not switched on to this session, and they'll watch it later on. So they want to succeed, but they don't have the attitude. So what's your go-to to a person who actually does not have the right attitude to try and develop that? Because I don't think you can just switch on like a light bulb, can you?
I mean, I suppose the question is, are you somebody who believes the glass is half full? Or are you somebody who believes the glass is half empty? And what is draining you? What is dragging you down? What is stopping you? And I think it's really that self-evaluation that says, what is holding me back? What is stopping me doing what I want to do? And I think you need self-reflection to understand, what do you need that will drive you? Only you know the answer to that question. You're not going to get it from anybody else. And for me, it's a constant reminder that to remain focused, to remain positive, is to focus on the things that you can do and you can do well. And if there are things that I can't do, I need to reach out to somebody who can help me. And it's again, I go back to, in this environment, the best advice I can give you is put that emotion and ego to one side, share knowledge, reach out to people who can help, reach out to people who can answer questions that you're struggling with, because people will, just like you reached out to me. I'm sitting in Monaco, you simply, somebody contacted me, but having the confidence, the determination, the belief that I will pick up the phone and respond, made it happen. It didn't just happen by itself. Somebody made this webinar happen. So what I'm saying is, just like you guys reach out to me and I became available and wanted to help, there are people, everyone listening to this webinar today, there is somebody that you can reach out to that could make a difference to you. But the thing is, you're not picking up the phone and you're not making the connection. And that's how people do well.
And they're waiting for others. There's some great questions, and I'll say this much. I've probably got time for 3 questions. Then we're going to have to wrap up. So I'm going to encourage others where your questions don't get asked. In fact, post it on the various social media groups with Minara. You can tag me, Ashraf Garda. You can tag James Caan on Twitter. But use the hashtag Minara with James Caan. And as you've heard, you can certainly also post the questions directly on LinkedIn, right? And hopefully we'll get those answered, because I think it's an important point that we can do. But here's the thing, and I think Ibrahim Patel, who's very linked to Minara, brought up this point about, working from home. So we know the environment has changed dramatically, and without spending too much time on why it changed, the reality is it has changed. Okay, so going forward, keeping in mind the restraints and the constraints of this terrain, but on the other hand, the liberating fact that we can speak to you in Monaco and the south of France that we could never ever have done before. What's your advice for people who are battling with their different businesses to try and find a new way to be completely relevant, besides saying, out of the box? What should they be doing, considering their own space has dramatically changed?
I mean, so I, like everybody, have been forced to work from home because of the pandemic, because of travel restrictions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, I've been working from home, and in the beginning, it was a bit of a novelty, and we all convinced ourselves, isn't it fantastic? We spend more time with our families, and working from home is great. But to be honest, after 3 months, the novelty wore off, and it became a bit soul destroying. Waking up every morning and spending 10 hours a day staring at a screen actually, for me, lost the excitement. The one thing that I do that actually does help me a bit is 3 times a day, I take a 20-minute walk. So in my diary, I actually put in 20-minute break, and I don't just take a break or make a tea. I actually physically go out and go for a walk, because I think we as human beings have grown up interacting with others. We're not people who I think necessarily work at our best when we're literally in isolation the whole time. So what I find is when I go for a walk, I see people, I take a breath of fresh air. It allows my mind to refocus. So generally, I start work at 8 in the morning. By 11:30 to 12 o'clock, I'll take a break. I'll work probably till 1:30, then I'll have lunch. Then I'll take a break again at 3. But I need to get fresh air. I need to get out of that room. I need to get off that screen. I need to reflect and time to rethink, because this new environment that we're in is not what we were conditioned to. And yes, I accept our productivity is very good, but also I think we need to keep our brain active. So I think taking those regular breaks, not just, going to the kitchen and making a coffee, go out of the room, take a walk, get some fresh air, see people outside, interact, then come back, and you will find you are much more dynamic. You're much more refreshed when you come back to that screen.
I get it. I get it that you are as deliberate as you say, as you've just explained. That means it's not go with the flow, right? It's very deliberate, very thought out in terms of even your leisure time, and it's a point well made. So I was going to talk about this, but I'll pick up on what Zakira Ali is saying. She says not all businesses can successfully play in the e-commerce space. And just picking up on that broad point, okay, and probably the last question I can ask you here. So e-commerce, so existing business pivots to e-commerce, or existing business that resists pivoting to e-commerce because everybody else is doing it, they still need to find their unique way to survive. What if they were operating outside of the e-commerce space? What advice would you give them?
And firstly, I would agree that not everything translates to technology. There are a number of businesses that I've looked at where my entrepreneur said, James, we need to go e-commerce. And the truth is, in that particular segment of the market, it's not appropriate. So yes, I think e-commerce we need to understand, but I'm not sure it's that kind of one size fits all approach that will work. I think sometimes, in some cases, that traditional model is still the best model available. And I think it's really understanding your market, your customer, and where is the market going? What are your customers looking for? What is driving that customer? Is it product? Is it service? Or is it price? The better you understand what your customer needs, and I think when people ask this question, it's really not an answer that I can give. The answer exists in what is the behavior of what is happening to your customer, because it is he who drives the strategy for where your market ends up. People didn't overnight become e-commerce related, but that's where the market drove them. So you've got to look at your segment, whether you're in hairdressing or cars or digital media, recruitment, whatever. The question is, what is the trend in your market? And is your business capable of following that trend? And if it is not, you need to change and you need to adapt.
And here's the last thing, and I'll borrow from
Ashraf,
what
I'm going to
Ashraf
run
said.
out of time because I need to be on a
Absolutely.
Zoom call with
Here's the
another
last
board
thing.
meeting.
What is your advice for low-lying fruits? For people who know nothing, of a blank screen, and it's like, what business can I get into based upon the new changing trends from consumers?
I think that isn't how I look at life. We shouldn't chase businesses in that way. I don't necessarily believe that I can say to you, go into technology or go into recruitment. Businesses were never built that way. Businesses were never created that way. When you start a business, we go back to the start of this webinar, business is about people. Business is about your attitude. Business is about who you are. What I said earlier on is people transform businesses. So I don't necessarily think the answer is you should go into sector A. I think you have to look at yourself and say, what am I capable of doing? What are my key strengths? What do I bring to the table? And I think it is you who has to look at yourself and say, what am I good at? There's no point me giving you a recommendation of a sector that has no relevance to who you are. So I think success comes from you. It's understanding where you will be the most successful, taking your strengths, your characteristics into consideration, and finding a business that fits who you are, because that's where I think success lies.
Well, I certainly love that. I think, who am I? What am I? What am I good at? What is it that gives me the best opportunity to succeed? I mean, those are key words from James Caan. And it resonates with what I always say, champion people build champion nations. So the bottom line to you as the audience is, what is it that will set me on a path to becoming a champion? What are the skills inherently that I have? James Caan, you're very much a champion. That's why we speak to you. And champions do have deadlines, and your time is up. I know that. But wonderful that you've shared your knowledge with us. And the great thing about it, it's not just 150, 200 people watching us today. We will amplify this throughout the length and breadth of the world. You can be assured of that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Asghar. Just on a final note, a lot of what I've shared with you today, you can get access to my book, which is Start Your Business in 7 Days. And I would love to make that book free available to all of the people listening to this webinar today. If you go onto my website, jamescaan.com, you can access the book free of charge, download it at your leisure, both audio and written format. And a lot of the points that we've raised today, are available in that book. I wish you well. I wish you a happy and healthful career. And thank you for joining us today. Take care and God bless.
Absolutely perfect. There we are. Thank you, James Caan. So maybe my last word, wonderful to be here, but Asghar Mohammed, the Deputy President of Minara, has got some important things to say to you. So let's get to, let's get to him first. Asghar, go ahead.
This has been an exciting webinar that has given us great insight and a deeper understanding of the challenges that we as businesses face and the strategies that we adopt to survive in this ever-changing world. On behalf of the Minara Chamber of Commerce, we express our immense thanks and appreciation to James Caan for sharing his experiences, expertise, and providing us with such critical and international insight. When we initially discussed the idea of this webinar with James, he accepted without any hesitation when he heard that this webinar was to assist the development of businesses in South Africa. Thank you, Ashraf Garda, for wonderfully steering and guiding the conversation. You exemplified the title Champion South Africa, and we appreciate your input and most valued contribution. Our thanks to our Baraka Bank for providing the Zoom link and technical backup, which this webinar would not have been possible. Thank you to all our media partners, including ITV, for broadcasting this webinar live, as well as the Lodium Sun for continuously forwarding out our webinar events messages. Most importantly, thank you to all our participants who joined us from across the country and even surrounding countries, either via the Zoom link or on our Facebook live feed. We are confident that you have found benefit in the webinar and James's discussion. Let us continue to grow our businesses, give back to society so that we may all prosper as a nation. Please be safe, be vigilant, and continue to observe all COVID protocols. Thank you, Ashraf.
Thank you, Asghar. And maybe just a final point, picking up on that. So many people have posted comments, which is fantastic. Many people have promoted themselves, which I think is the essence of what we are all about, and continue doing that, right? But I think from an organization point of view, some of the questions may be put to James Caan directly if we can. Others, I think, will be shared through the Minara Chambers itself, and that's good. But from an audience point of view, please continue sharing this on social media, because we want to amplify this. So if you hopefully have taken some pictures of the event, use that hashtag Minara with James Caan, and then tag James Caan. You can tag me, tag all the other guys, tag Minara specifically, and then let's make the point of connecting with each other. So we spoke about networking and some sort of high-level networking. I call it, making champion connections. So I'm going to suggest and advise even all of you. You may be part of communities of reference already, but go out onto LinkedIn, go to Twitter, go to Instagram, go to wherever, because James Caan's on all of those places, by the way, and you can find him there. But not just him, find us there. Let's make a point of following each other. I'm going to do that, I promise you. I'm going to pick up all those names there, like Zaid Osman and Zakia Ali and Nazreen, I know, Nabil Omar. I'm going to find those people, and I'm going to try and follow each and every one of you. So let's do that for each other, because that would be the type of champion connection we need to make so that we can be champions in our own space. So the last thing, Solly, I'm not too sure whether you want to say anything else, but from my side, an absolute privilege to be a part of this. And the challenge for all of us as we end up now is this: what is it that we have learned that we can take back to our homes, to our businesses, that we can apply, and we can apply with the type of vigor that is needed, and that we've seen people who have succeeded all around the world have done, to the point that one day, and this is a challenge to all of you, one day, why can we not say, instead of Minara with James Caan, with respect, what about Minara with, and you can fill in your names? That's the challenge. You want that to happen? Well, you know what you have to do. Solly, up to you.
Jazakallah. Thank you, Ashraf, and thank the audience for joining us today. I mean, brilliant. I would request the audience to give us suggestions of other speakers. We'd like to do this on a regular basis. We need, I mean, it's a global village at the moment, so we need to get more information, and, have access to more speakers. We need to make a difference, and I think we need to support Ashraf on his champion for South Africa. I think that's a brilliant opportunity for us, and we need to kind of lock in and follow that process. And I'm sure Ashraf will be part and parcel of any future initiatives. But it's been fantastic. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I don't normally, sit through these webinars, but I really think it was a brilliant speaker. Thank you to Ibrahim and Asghar for identifying him. But we need to have many more speakers of this nature, and we need to make a difference across the country. And if we don't make a difference, we're going to be in trouble in this country. Thank you, Ashraf. Thank you, everyone. From my side, Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay.